Hey everyone, welcome back to Code of the Row. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create this round UI progress bar. This is the Patreon request, and pretty much we're going to be creating a material so you don't have to import any assets. First, we're going to be creating that round progress bar material, and then we're going to be using it as our health, mana, and stamina bar, and assigning it the color that matches that statistics tag. So the first thing we're going to do is head over to our content, full sample, and I'll just right click in my full sample, create a material, and I'm going to call this something like round or m underscore round progress bar. And now I'm going to double click to open this up. And the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that the material domain is set to user interface because we're going to be using this in our UI. And I'm going to set the blend mode to translucent because we want to make sure that opacity is able to have a value in it. So now what I need to do is I'm going to add a few things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold 1 on my keyboard and left click in order to assign a value to the final color. So I'm just going to type in 1 for this value and change it to the final color. And now in our material preview, you will see this square. And I want to start subtracting it out and make it a solid looking circle without anything in the middle too. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my graph and look for a radial gradient exponential. And there are a few things. So I'll just connect this to the opacity for now. And now you'll see that it looks like a blurred rounded circle, and we'll play around with this. So I'm going to hold 1 and left click again and change this value to 0.5 and connect this to our radius. And this is going to set our radius to 0.5 as stated. And if I were to set something to like 1, you'll see that it's just a square again with some shades on the very corner. And if I set it to 2, it's going to be a very clear picture. But let's set it to 0.5 because we want that circle, and then we're going to invert it. Now for the density, we're going to calculate the density of this circle or of the image itself. So I'm going to hold 1 on my keyboard again, left click and set this to density. And currently 0 won't show anything. So I'm going to change this value to something like 60 so we get a very sharp looking image of the circle. And now I'm just going to copy or Control D while this is highlighted and add another radial gradient exponential down here. And I'm going to add a subtract node coming from my 0.5 value. So I'm going to look for subtract just like this. And let's clean this up so you guys can see. And now this subtract node will actually plug into the radius, but we need a value for our B node to subtract something by, or else we can't see this. And what we're going to do is define how thick this circle is going to be. So I'm going to hold 1 on the keyboard again and add a constant, or you can just right click and look for a constant. So now for this value, which is defaulted to 0, I'm going to right click and convert this into a parameter so we can edit this when it's a material instance later. So I'm just going to call this thickness and set the default value to something like 0.1. And now I'll connect this default value to B. And nothing's going to happen yet because we don't have anything coming out of the exponential radial gradient over here. But now I actually want to subtract these two again. So I'm going to subtract the top radial gradient to the bottom one, just like that. And now I'm going to plug in my subtract where the former opacity was. And now you'll see that we're starting to get a circle in the middle and on the outsides of the square. So it looks like a circle, but we also want to sharpen this up and make it more clear to make it look like a solid circle. So I'm just going to hit apply and save. And now we'll begin on the upper part, which is going to modify the opacity even further. So the first thing I'm going to do is way back here, I'm going to look for a texture coordinate and just leave it as 1 and 1. And now I'm going to output this pin and look for a custom rotator. And the custom rotator will basically define what position we're on. So for example, if our health is 50%, we're only going to be seeing half the circle. So I'll set the rotation value at 25% because of the angle that we're going to be moving this direction in. So I'll hold 1 or look for a constant and set this to something like 0.25 and plug this into rotation angle. And now I'm going to subtract this node with a specific value, which is going to be something like 0.5. And you can plug it in here or create a constant, and I'll just create a constant, call it 0.5 and plug it into the B. And after we subtract the node, we actually want to multiply it by a vector2 node. And in order to get a vector2, you can right click and look for a constant to vector, just like that. And for the coordinates of this, we're going to do x as 1 and y as -1 and plug this into the B value for the multiplication here. And now we're going to connect this to a vector to radial value. And what this is going to do is essentially the input coordinates or the vector will be transformed into radial coordinates. So this is really going to get that circular motion going when our HP reduces and or increases. And now we're just going to add this node with a percent. So I'm going to actually scooch this over here because we need more space. And now we want to be able to define the percent in our material instance because we're going to use the UI to manipulate this. So I'm going to hold 1 and left click. And while this is highlighted, I'm going to right click and convert this to a parameter. And I'm going to call this percent. And now the point of our parameter, again, is just to make sure that we can control this outside of the material. And we'll be able to use this value in our UI or widget blueprint. So now for the default value, I'm going to set this to 1 and connect this to the B node of the add. And now I'm just going to floor it because we want to make sure that it gets to a rounded part. And then after we floor it, we're going to multiply it one last time with what we're subtracting down here with the radial gradient exponentials. So I'm just going to connect that over to the multiply node, and now I'm going to connect this over to opacity. And now you'll see that it actually is still looking the same, and that's because for our radial gradient exponential, we're not actually subtracting the density again, which we really want to do. So I'm going to connect the 60 value that I forgot to earlier to connect it to the bottom one, and we'll get this fully looking circle. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So let's go over this a little bit. So if I were to change the percent to something like 0.5, you're only going to see half of the circle filled, which is exactly what we're looking for. 0.75, we'll set it to a quarter way missing, and 0.25 and 0 and so on. And that's exactly what we're looking for in this. So I'm going to hit save and apply this material. And now I'll go back to my folder that I created this in, right click, and I'm going to create a material instance. And I'm just going to leave the name as m_round progress bar inst. And I'm going to just double click to open this up, just check on the settings. And I'm going to make sure the percent is checked. And I'm actually just going to set this to 0 for now because I want the UI to handle this properly. And I want to make sure that since I start my character with 100%, I don't want to see it at 100% and mistakenly think that it's working. So after that's done, make sure this is checked. And now we're going to go back to the ultimate map and we're going to go over to our HUD class. If you're using ACF full sample or ultimate, it doesn't matter. This will work for both. You're just going to want to open that widget blueprint, ultimate HUD or full sample HUD, just to see all your stats. And I'm just going to go over to where it says my stat bar WBP. And I got here by clicking on my HP bar. You can do it with your stamina or mana as well. And now I'm just going to click edit stat bar up here to get to it. You can also just look for this in your folder, which is going to be in your full sample HUD folder. And we can just double click stat bar WBP to open this up. And now what I need to do in here is actually just add a size box and an image. So I'm going to leave the stat bar showing for now, just because I want to make sure that this value of the progress bar matches my circular bar, just to make sure that since this is already working and we know it's working, making sure that the circle matches this. So in my library, I'm going to head over to the top, look for a size box and drag this into my canvas panel. And now in my size box, I want to add an image. And for the size box, I'm just going to set the X and Y as 200 by 200. And for the image, I'm going to change the brush. I'm going to open the brush while image is selected and change the image to something like m_round progress bar instance, because we're just looking for the instance. And this looks good to me. So I'm going to change the image name and make sure that it's checked as a variable to something like, I'll just name it image for now. I think that's perfectly fine. And after that's done, I'm just going to head over to my graph. And now in my graph, I want to start changing ACF stuff to working with my round progress bar. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that my event graph will actually create the dynamic material and set the proper stats already. So currently you'll see that in ACF, we do have a pre-construct to initiate the style, which is going to be our color and so on. And then a construct to initiate the references of our values. And we have stat values, a tick that's going to be up, and so on. So what I'm going to do is actually just break this branch, which is going to the set percent, and drag this out a little bit, just like that. Make sure the stat progress bar is still connected because we are going to be still using that for this tutorial. And with the branch, we're just going to make sure that let's right click up here and create a dynamic material instance. And now we're going to select the parent to be our instance that we created. So the round progress bar instance. And for the return value, I'm going to right click and make sure that you promote this to a variable. And I'll call this variable something like round progress bar inst, just to get the return value of our parent as a variable. And now that that's created, I'm actually going to make sure to see if this is a valid variable. So I'm going to drag this out and get it. And I'm going to connect this to a is valid node. And basically, if this is valid, we're going to connect the true pin up here to the execution pin of the valid. And if it's actually not valid, then we're going to create the dynamic material instance and continue the sequence that we are making right now. So let's move this to the right. And now what I want to do is actually just set a brush from a material using the image that we have created. So I'm going to get the image, just put it right here, and add a set brush from material. And this will get us that image to show. So we'll connect the target to image, the execution pins together, and the round progress bar inst over here to the material. And now I want to set a scalar parameter value for our round progress bar instance. So I'll go back in my variables, and that round progress bar instance that we created, I'm just going to get that and set scalar parameter value. And we need to make sure that the parameter value matches the one in our material instance that we created. So make sure that the percent here is spelled exactly how you put the parameter name here. Because as you can see in our material back here, we created this parameter called percent, and that is why we exposed it to a user interface as the material domain. So for the it's valid, I'm just going to make sure if it's valid, it connects to this pin as well as the set brush from material to make sure that we are always setting the scalar parameter value no matter what. And now in ACF down here in the event graph, you'll see that the event tick gets the stat values and divides the current value by the max value and puts it into the target, as well as the display value, delta time from the tick, and the return value, and so on. And it's already set to a display value up here. So all I need to do is just connect this pin over to the value of our set scalar parameter value that we created. So now this is going to update our percent of the round progress bar. And because I want that square progress bar that initially came with ACF working just to work and double check our values, I'm just going to connect this execution pin down here to set percent. So I'm going to hit compile and save. But now you can see that if I were to go in my actions, if I were to go in my project and hit play, the round progress bars are white and it kind of looks a little weird, and that's totally fine because round progress bars, you should really be just putting this in different locations instead of the way that I am over here, and you can just really drag this in or make it its own widget blueprint and just delete that square one. But back in the stat widget bar, I'm just going to make sure that the colors are set so we know what we're referring to. So in our init style, this is where our colors in Ascend Combat Framework are actually set. So for example, there is a colors by stat node, and down here in the default value, you can actually change this to how you want. So for example, if you have an rpg.statistics.health, the value color is red. And this is exactly where you can change it to if you don't want a red for health, green for stamina, and blue for mana. And this is the reference of our statistics tag. So this one just says stat.health. And once we find it, it's going to set that fill color and opacity. But what I want to do is, since we are manipulating the image, because that's the actual source of our circular progress bar, I'm just going to get the image and set color and opacity and just connect this to the next execution pin of our nodes, and make sure that the colors by stat defined part is actually connected to the in color and opacity. And this is exactly how we just update our colors and opacity. So now when I go back to the ultimate map, I hit play, and now you'll see that there is a red circular bar, a green one, and a blue one. And let's make sure that this actually works. So let me just add an ACF defender into the project just to beat me up. And now when I hit play, I'm going to have him attack me, and both HP bars should be going down percentage-wise equally the same. So this looks pretty good. It looks like I'm missing a little more than a quarter of my health from both the circular bar and the HP bar. And now let me try running just to test that stamina out, or dodge rolling in this case. And it looks like it's kind of hard for me to get rid of my stamina. Oh, attacking gets rid of it pretty easily. And now let me try using my mana. So this is good. I can see my mana regenning slowly on the circular bar and both the progress bar. And yeah, thanks for watching Code with Ro. Like, subscribe, comment below what you want to see next, and that is how you create circular progress bars in ACF. This is a Patreon request. If you do have any more, feel free to join the Discord community and the Patreon to get exclusive content and tutorial requests